At first, Zara tried to ignore the changes, convincing herself that Ayanlay was just stressed. He had always been ambitious, working hard to provide for their future. But soon, the excuses no longer made sense. He started staying out late, barely speaking to her when he was home. The warmth in his eyes, the gentle touches, everything faded. Zara's pregnancy should have been a time of joy, but instead, she found herself walking on eggshells. Ayanley's temper flared over the smallest things. If dinner wasn't to his liking, he'd push the plate away without a word. If she asked about his whereabouts, his jaw would tighten, and he'd snap at her to stop nagging. The man she had loved, the man who had once held her hand and whispered promises of forever, now treated her like a burden. One evening, after another silent dinner, Zara gathered the courage to ask what was wrong. "Did I do something, Ayanle? You've changed." His cold stare sent a chill through her. "Just focus on the baby," he muttered before grabbing his keys and walking out, leaving Zara alone, her heart sinking into a darkness she never saw coming. At first, Zara tried to ignore the signs. Maybe he was just busy, maybe she was overthinking, but the truth was staring her in the face. Ayanle started coming home late, sometimes past midnight, sometimes not at all. When Zara called, he wouldn't pick up. If he did, his voice was sharp, impatient. "Why are you disturbing me?" he would snap before hanging up. Then came the whispers. She would wake up at night to find him on the phone, speaking in low tones. When she asked who it was, he would roll his eyes. "Work," he would say. "Stop being paranoid." But it wasn't just the phone call. Money started disappearing from their joint account. Large amounts. When she checked the transactions, she saw payments for expensive restaurants, hotel booking, and luxury gifts. None of those things were for her. One evening, as she was doing laundry, she found something that made her blood run cold. Ayanle's shirt smelled of expensive women's perfume, one she didn't own. And worse, there was a lipstick stain on the collar, deep red. Someone else's lips had touched her husband's clothes. Zara's hands trembled as she folded the shirt. She told herself there had to be an explanation. But deep down, she knew the truth. She decided to gather proof before confronting him. The next morning, while he was in the shower, she took his phone. Her heart pounded as she scrolled through his messages. There they were. Messages from an unknown number. "Last night was amazing, baby. Can't wait to see you again. When will you leave that boring wife of yours?" Zara's breath caught in her throat. It felt like someone had punched her in the chest. She dropped the phone, her whole body shaking. That night when Ayanlay came home, she finally asked him. Her voice was soft but firm. "Ayanlay, who is she?" He didn't even flinch. He looked at her with cold, dead eyes. Then, in a voice that sent chills down her spine, he said, "It's none of your business." None of her business? The father of her unborn child, the man who once promised to love and protect her, the man she sacrificed for. And now he was cheating on her and didn't even care to hide it. Zara felt something inside her break. She wasn't just hurt, she was angry. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Ayanlay, I am your wife," he scoffed. And that one word shattered everything. He didn't love her anymore. He didn't respect her. She was just an inconvenience to him now. Zara realized then, this was only the beginning of her nightmare. Zara had been holding it in for too long. She had ignored the late nights, the unanswered calls, and the scent of another woman on his clothes. She had swallowed her pain every time she saw money disappearing from their account. But she couldn't stay silent anymore. That evening, as Ayanlay walked into the house, Zara stood in the living room, her hands clenched into fists. Her heart was pounding, but she forced herself to stay strong. "Who is she?" she asked, her voice shaking. Ayanlay barely looked at her. He tossed his keys on the table and pulled out his phone, scrolling like she wasn't even there. Zara took a deep breath and stepped closer. "I saw the messages, Ayanlay. I know you've been cheating." His fingers froze on his phone screen. Slowly he lifted his head and met her eyes. There was no guilt, no regret, just annoyance. "And what if I am?" he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. Zara felt like she had been stabbed in the chest. She had expected denial, maybe even an excuse, but not this. He didn't care. Her voice broke as she whispered, "You're the father of my child, Ayanlay. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" His lips curled into a cruel smirk. "I didn't ask for this baby, Zara. You're the one who wanted it." Tears blurred her vision. She had dreamed of a happy family, of raising their child together, of love. But the man standing in front of her wasn't the man she had married. He was a stranger. Anger bubbled up inside her. "You disgust me!" She spat. That was when it happened. A sharp, blinding pain exploded across her cheek as Ayanlay's hand connected with her face. The force of the slap sent her stumbling backward. She barely caught herself before she hit the floor, one hand flying to her belly in terror. For a second, everything was silent. The room spun around her. Her skin burned where he had struck her. She looked up, eyes wide with shock. "You hit me?" she whispered. Ayanle's face was cold, expressionless. "Never question me again," he said, his voice low and threatening. Zara's whole body shook. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but instead, she stayed still, her hands cradling her unborn child. In that moment, something inside her changed. This wasn't love. This wasn't marriage. This was a prison. She had spent months pretending things would get better, hoping he would come back to her, praying that the man she loved was still in there somewhere. But he wasn't. He was gone. And if she stayed, she would be next. Ayanlay turned away, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just shattered her completely. He picked up his phone and walked toward the bedroom. "I don't want to hear another word about this," he muttered, before disappearing inside. Zara stood there, her face still stinging, her mind racing. She knew now. This wasn't just about cheating. This wasn't just about lies. This was about survival, and for the sake of her baby, she had to find a way out. Zara lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her cheek still burned from Ayanle's slap, but the real pain was in her heart. She had given him everything, her love, her loyalty, her trust, and he had thrown it all away. Beside her, Ayanle slept peacefully, like he had done nothing wrong, like he hadn't just hit his pregnant wife, like he wasn't cheating, lying, and destroying everything they had built. Zara turned on her side, one hand resting on her belly. The baby kicked gently, as if sensing her pain. A tear slid down her cheek. "I have to protect you," she thought. "I won't let him hurt us." She had been silent for too long, but not anymore. Carefully, she slid out of bed, moving as quietly as possible. Ayanle didn't stir. He was deep in sleep, probably dreaming of the other woman. Zara picked up her phone with shaky hands and stepped out of the bedroom, closing the door behind her. She took a deep breath, then dialed a number she had memorized long ago but never dared to call. The phone rang once, twice. Then a familiar voice answered. "Zara!" Her chest tightened at the sound. It had been months since she had spoken to them, since Ayanlay had slowly isolated her from everyone who truly cared about her. "I need help," she whispered, her voice breaking. There was silence on the other end. Then a deep sigh. "I've been waiting for this call." Zara's breath hitched. "You knew. I saw the bruises in your last photo. I heard the sadness in your voice, but I knew you had to realize it yourself." Tears streamed down Zara's face. She had tried to hide it, to pretend everything was fine, but some people saw through the lies. "I can't stay," she choked out. "Not after tonight." There was no hesitation in the response. "Say the word, and I'll be there." Zara glanced at the bedroom door. She could hear Ayanle's soft breathing. He had no idea that his control over her was slipping away. She wiped her tears and took a deep, steadying breath. "It's time." And with those two words, she changed her fate forever. The morning started like any other. For Ayanlay, he stretched, yawned, and reached for his phone. No missed calls, no messages from Zara. Good. He didn't want to hear her whining after last night. He got out of bed, feeling in control, like always. After all, Zara was too weak, too scared to do anything. He had made sure of that, or so he thought. As he stepped into the living room, something felt off. Zara was sitting on the couch, but she wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even looking at him. She was calm, too calm. Before he could open his mouth, a firm knock came at the door. Bang, bang, bang. Ayanle frowned. Who the hell? He pulled open the door, and his heart stopped. Two police officers stood there, serious and unmoving. One held up a piece of paper. "Mr. Ayanlay, you are under arrest." The room spun. "What? For what?" he demanded, his voice rising. The officer's expression didn't change. "For domestic violence and financial fraud. You need to come with us." Ayanlay let out a bitter laugh. "This is a joke. My wife would never." He turned to Zara, expecting her to defend him, to plead, to cry. But she just sat there, silent, watching. A cold chill ran down his spine. "You did this?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Zara finally met his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she looked like herself again, strong, unafraid. "I warned you," she said simply. Ayanlay's mind raced. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. "Baby, let's talk," he tried, forcing a smile. "This is a misunderstanding." Zara tilted her head. "Was it a misunderstanding when you stole money from our account?" The officer behind him raised an eyebrow. "We have bank records, Mr. Ayanlay." His stomach twisted. Zara continued. "Was it a misunderstanding when you hit me?" The second officer stepped forward. "We have photos and medical reports." His mouth went dry. "Or when you cheated," Zara added, her voice sharper now. One of the officers pulled out a phone. A video played. Ayanlay laughing, flirting with another woman, kissing her. Zara's voice rang in his ears. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Ayanlay's world was crumbling. He had been so sure, so confident, that Zara would never stand up to him, that she would always stay silent, but he had underestimated her. One officer grabbed his wrist. "Hands behind your back." "No! Wait! Zara, please! You're my wife! You can't do this to me!" Zara stood up and walked to the door. She looked at him one last time. "I'm not your wife anymore." And with that the police led Ayanlay away. As the door shut, Zara took a deep breath. For the first time in months, she felt free. Zara sat alone in the quiet living room, her fingers gripping the tiny memory card. This small piece of plastic held the truth Ayanlay thought he had buried. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. No, fear had left her the moment she decided to fight back. Now, all that remained was determination. She took a deep breath and inserted the card into her laptop. The screen flickered to life, and the video began to play. At first, there was silence. Then, the sound of her own voice. Soft, hesitant. "Who is she?" Then came the slap. Loud, sharp, brutal. Zara flinched, but she forced herself to keep watching. She saw herself stumble, holding her belly. She heard Ayanlay's voice, dark and cruel. "Never question me again." The video didn't lie. It didn't twist the truth the way Ayanlay always did. It showed everything. The rage in his eyes, the way he towered over her, the way she shrank under his violence. But that wasn't the only evidence she had. Zara pulled up the bank statements she had secretly printed. Her savings account, the one she had built with years of hard work, was almost empty. Hundreds of thousands had vanished. She traced the transactions, her breath catching as she recognized a pattern. Ayanlay hadn't just been stealing, he had been using her money to fund another woman's lifestyle. Expensive dinners, jewelry, hotel bookings, even rent. Her heart pounded. He had drained her account to build a life with someone else. Her fingers clenched into fists. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft. A plan formed in her mind. She wasn't going to cry. She wasn't going to beg. She was going to end this. Zara reached for her phone and dialed the number again. "It's worse than I thought," she said, her voice steady. "I have proof. A video. Bank records." There was silence on the other end. Then, the voice replied, firm and certain. "Then it's time to use them." Zahra exhaled. The final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Ayanlay had no idea what was coming for him. Ayanlay sat in the cold, sterile interrogation room, his hands trembling in his lap. He had been through a lot in his life, but this felt like the end of everything. His mind raced. He never thought it would come to this, never thought Zara would fight back. He had always believed she was weak. But now, as the walls seemed to close in on him, Ayanlay knew he was facing a nightmare he couldn't escape. The door opened, and the sound of footsteps echoed in the silence. His heart skipped a beat as a familiar face walked in. His mistress, Lola. She was the last person he expected to see here. He had promised her the world, a life of luxury and everything she desired. But now, Here she was, standing across from him with tears in her eyes. "Ayanlay," she whispered, her voice shaky. He stared at her, eyes wide in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" She collapsed into the chair, burying her face in her hands. "I'm sorry, Ayanlay," she cried. I didn't know it would go this far." Ayanle's stomach churned. "What are you talking about?" Lola looked up at him, eyes filled with regret. I was a part of your lies, your scheme. I didn't know you were stealing from Zara. I didn't know you were using her money. I thought you really loved me. I thought we were going to be together." The words hit Ayanle like a slap to the face. His heart pounded, but there was something else, something darker, more chilling. "Wait," he whispered, voice low and dangerous. "You're telling me you're turning on me now?" Lola wiped her tears, her face red and swollen. "I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But when I found out you were lying to me, to her, I couldn't keep living the way we were. You promised me a future, Ayanle, but now I see the truth." Ayanle felt his anger rise, the rage bubbling up from deep within him. He stood up, slamming his hands against the table. "You're the one who should be sorry. You've ruined everything." But Lola didn't flinch. "No, Ayanle, you ruined everything. You used both of us. You thought you could keep your secrets hidden, but now you're facing the consequences." The words hit him like a wave. She wasn't on his side anymore. Lola, the woman he had trusted to keep his secrets, had turned against him. She was the final piece of the puzzle that would bring him down. "You're the one who's going to pay for this," Ayanle growled, but Lola's voice cut through his threats. "No, Ayanle, you are. You'll never get away with this. They'll find everything. The stolen money, the lies, the betrayal. And I'll make sure they know the truth. You can't lie your way out of this anymore." His world seemed to collapse in on him. The woman who had once been a part of his twisted plans was now turning him in. He had underestimated everyone, Zara, Lola, even the police. "I thought you loved me," Ayanle spat, fury in his eyes. Lola shook her head, a sad smile crossing her lips. "I loved the idea of you, Ayanle, but I didn't love the man who betrayed everyone around him for his own selfish gain." Ayanle's mind raced, panic beginning to set in. He had nothing left, not his mistress, not his money, not even his freedom. And as he sat there, staring at Lola, who was no longer the woman he had once used and controlled, he realized the truth. He was losing everything. His lies, his manipulation, his cruelty, none of it had saved him. Lola stood up, wiping the last of her tears. "I hope you enjoy your time in prison, Ayanle, because it's coming, and it's all your fault." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Ayanle in the silence, surrounded by the weight of his own destruction. The news hit like a storm. What Ayanle had done, stealing from his pregnant wife, abusing her, and betraying everyone around him, became the talk of the town. It spread quickly, and soon no one was willing to turn a blind eye. Once, Ayanle had been respected. He was known as a hard-working, charming man. People admired him for his success, his smooth talk, and the life he seemed to have built. But now, everything had changed. It started with whispers, soft at first, then louder as more details emerged. Zara's side of the story became public, the police reports, the shocking videos, and the evidence of his deceit. People couldn't believe it. Ayanle, the man who had been a part of their community for so long, the man they had trusted, how could he do something like this? As the truth unfolded, the respect Ayanle had built with years of effort crumbled to dust. The local shopkeepers, the ones who had always greeted him with a smile, now refused to even make eye contact. They whispered behind his back, judging him for what he had done. No one was willing to defend him anymore. Neighbors who once admired him now crossed the street to avoid him. They shook their heads in disbelief as they heard the detail. Some even gathered in small groups to discuss how a man they had trusted could do such cruel things to a woman who had only loved him. But the worst part was yet to come. Ayanle's family, his mother, his brothers, and even his cousins, the ones who had always stood by him, now turned their backs. At first, they tried to distance themselves, claiming they didn't know the full story. But as more came out, they could no longer pretend. They disowned him publicly, ashamed of the man he had become. His mother, once his greatest supporter, spoke out in an interview. "I raised him better than this. I never thought he could hurt a woman, let alone his own wife. I don't know who he is anymore." His father, who had always praised his son's ambition, remained silent, but his silence said everything. His brothers, who used to look up to Ayanlay, now distanced themselves from him, choosing not to be associated with his shameful actions. The message was clear. Ayanlay had no place in their family anymore. People who had once defended him now called him out. "He's a disgrace to the community," one local said. "How could he do that to her? To his own wife? He deserves what's coming." Even his friends, the ones who had stood by him in good times and bad, turned away. "He crossed a line," one of them said. "What he did to Zara, that's unforgivable. He's on his own now." Zara, on the other hand, had become a symbol of strength and resilience. She was no longer the quiet, broken woman people once thought her to be. The community rallied behind her. Women who had been through their own struggles shared their support for Zara, praising her for standing up to Ayanlay and showing that she would never be a victim. The local church offered her prayers, and even the mayor sent a message of support, commending her courage. The streets were filled with people discussing how they would never allow a man like Ayanlay to destroy the peace of their community. Ayanlay, meanwhile, could only sit in silence. As the world he once knew crumbled around him, he realized that the people who had once respected him had turned their backs. His family, his friends, his community, they were all gone. No one stood by him anymore. No one defended him. And as the outrage grew, Ayanlay was forced to face the fact that his actions had not only cost him his freedom, but his place in the world he once belonged to. The community's outrage wasn't just about his crimes. It was about the betrayal of trust, the destruction of a family, and the realization that even the people closest to him couldn't stand by him when they saw who he truly was. With Ayanlay behind bars, Zara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she could breathe deeply, knowing that the nightmare was finally over. The man who had hurt her so much, the man who had betrayed her trust, was no longer a part of her life. But the road to freedom had been long and painful. Zara had faced so many struggles, so many moments when she felt lost and unsure. But in the end, she had found the strength to stand up for herself and her unborn child. And now, as she looked ahead, she knew that she was ready for a new chapter. She left the old home, the place where so many painful memories had been made. The house that once felt like a symbol of love and family now felt like a prison. Every room reminded her of the betrayal, the lies, and the violence that had destroyed her peace. Zara moved into a new home, a fresh start in a place where she felt safe and loved. It wasn't a huge mansion, but it didn't matter. It was hers, and it was a space where she could heal, a space where she could build her life again. The walls of her new home weren't just filled with furniture, they were filled with hope, new beginnings, and a sense of peace that had been missing for far too long. Her family and friends surrounded her with love and support. They were there to remind her that she was not alone, that she was strong, and that she deserved happiness. Zara had always been the one to give, to care for others, but now it was her turn to receive. She had built a community of people who truly cared about her, who wanted nothing more than to see her flourish. The support from her loved ones was overwhelming. Her mother, who had always been a quiet figure in the background, stepped up to help in ways Zara hadn't expected. She cooked for her, took care of her, and made sure Zara knew she was loved unconditionally. Zara's friends visited her regularly, bringing gifts and encouragement, reminding her that she was not defined by her past. But the greatest joy came when Zara welcomed her baby into the world. The moment she held her little one in her arms, everything changed. All the pain, the heartache, the struggle, none of it seemed as important in that moment. The love she felt for her baby was all that mattered now. Her child was the light in her life, the reason for every decision she had made, the reason she had fought so hard to escape the darkness. With her baby by her side, Zara knew she could face anything. The birth wasn't easy, but Zara had never been more determined. She had already fought so many battles. This was just another one, and she was ready. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and beautiful, Zara felt a rush of relief and joy. She was no longer just a victim. She was a mother, a survivor, and a warrior. The days that followed were filled with the kind of joy Zara had never known. She spent time bonding with her baby, watching as the tiny human she had carried for months began to grow and explore the world around them. Every smile, every coo, every moment was a reminder of the strength Zara had found within herself. As she looked at her baby, Zara knew she had made the right choice. She had walked away from the man who had once promised her everything, but gave her nothing but pain. She had chosen her own happiness and safety, and in doing so, she had built a future for herself and her child. Zara knew that life wasn't perfect. There would still be challenges ahead, but she was ready for them. She had learned that she was stronger than she had ever realized. No matter what came her way, she would face it with the same courage and determination that had carried her through the hardest moments of her life. Her new beginning wasn't just about a fresh start in a new home. It was about embracing the power within herself. It was about realizing that she was worthy of love, respect, and happiness. Zara had rebuilt her life from the ground up, and she was finally at peace. With her baby by her side, Zara was ready for the future. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving, and nothing, no one, could take that away from her. The road ahead was bright, and Zara was determined to walk it with strength, love, and hope. Ayanlay sat in the cold, lonely prison cell, the walls closing in on him as the reality of his actions sank in. He had once thought he could control everyone, that he could play with people's lives and escape without consequences. But now, there he was, locked away, his future destroyed, and the life he had once built crumbling to dust. From behind those prison bars, he watched Zara's life unfold through the small window of a TV in the prison's common area. The news, the stories, the updates, they all showed Zara's growth, her new beginning, and the joy she had found after leaving him. She was thriving, living the life he had promised her, but could never give her. He saw her surrounded by people who cared for her, her baby growing healthy and strong, and her spirit shining brighter than ever. And with every passing day, the sting of his regret grew deeper. Ayanlay had been so sure that he could manipulate everyone, including Zara. He had controlled her, belittled her, and broken her spirit, or so he thought. He had never imagined that she would find the strength to stand up to him, to fight back, and to escape the web of lies he had spun. But that's exactly what she did. In prison, the reality hit him hard. He had lost everything. The life he had once taken for granted, the friends, the respect, even his own family, all gone. His mother, his brothers, the people who had once been his closest allies. None of them would even look at him now. The shame was too great. And now he was alone, facing the consequences of his actions, with no one to blame but himself. What hurt the most was the fact that Zara had taken her power back, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. She had chosen herself, and in doing so, she had built a life that was everything he had denied her. She was living proof that the power of a woman who refuses to stay silent is unstoppable. Ayanlay, on the other hand, had underestimated her strength. He had never seen her as more than just someone he could control. But now, he realized that his biggest mistake had been thinking he could break her. Zara had risen above everything he had done to her, and she was now a symbol of resilience, strength, and courage. While Ayanlay rotted away in his cell, Zara was out there, building a life that would shine long after his fall from grace. His downfall wasn't just a punishment, it was a lesson, a harsh one, but one he would never forget. He had underestimated the power of a woman who refused to stay silent, a woman who would fight for herself, for her future, and for her child. As he sat there, alone and broken, the bitterness of his failure washed over him. He had thought he could play with people's lives, that he could manipulate them, but now all that was left was the harsh reality of his actions. And in the end, it was Zara who had the last laugh. Karma had dealt its final blow, and Ayanlay was left with nothing but the regret of his choices. He had tried to destroy Zara's life, but in the end, it was his own life that was ruined. The lesson was clear. Never underestimate the power of a woman who refuses to stay silent. She will always rise, and in doing so, she will make sure you fall.